Explained by the Billy Meier contacts. Mysteries, myths, legends, conspiracy theories, historical inaccuracies, and more. Compiled by David Chance, revised October 18, 2023.
Nazca lines. See also Easter Island Moai heads. See also long skulls. Contact Report 069. The Earth human is misguided if he or she wants to make the concerns of Easter Island an isolated concern. The events of earlier times on this island are in direct connection with the country, which you still call Tiahuanaco today, as it was called already at earliest time, in spite of past repeated changes. Easter Island and Tiahuanaco are more than 5,000 kilometers apart, and yet they are directly related to each other. However, the history of the connection goes back to very early times and ended only 2,548 years ago, calculated back from today, 1976, or 572 before Emmanuel. As I once explained to you, the last decisive settlement of the Earth by extraterrestrial intelligences took place about 13,500 Earth years ago. As you know, several of the immigrant horde became renegades, including a man in the rank of a half-Ishwish called Viracocha, who was already very old and extremely power-hungry. His name is still handed down on the Earth today, but with a small change, because for a long time now he has only been called Viracocha, and also as Jeshwish, although he was only in half the rank of such a person. Under his patronage and his cruel leadership, the highlands of Tiahuanaco at an altitude of about 4,000 meters were conquered, as was the Delta Island, which you call Easter Island. After this conquest, Viracocha settled with a special bodyguard of cherubim on the small island Mott, which is situated in front of Easter Island and which you call Motunui, or similar to my knowledge today. At that time it was called Mott because the cherubim were animal-human life forms. In this case, they were all bird-like. Mott means bird in our original language, so the island was called the Mott Island, or also the Island of the Bird People, as it is still called today. So Viracocha, or Viracocha, resided there. He and his followers, escaped Lyrans like many others who came to the Earth, were of gigantic physique, by earthly measure about 11 meters tall. They were the ones who taught the dwarfish, normal growing inhabitants of Tiahuanaco and Easter Island, who were procreations between earthlings and previously immigrated intelligences from the vastness of the universe, in many things, providing them with their own highly developed technology and teaching them how to operate the devices and machines. Thus, they also taught the natives of Tiahuanaco and Easter Island the work of stonemasonry, and they let themselves be celebrated as gods. With the help of the giants and their machines and other equipment, the natives worked many meters large head formations out of the lava stone, placed these, also with the help of machines, randomly around the island. Similar events took place in the areas you call Pisco, Nazca, and Sacsayhuaman, because the same giants had settled there. Thus, many statues and other structures were created, whereby also the shape of the spaceships on Easter Island were reproduced from rocks of the lava walls, which have survived to this day, namely oval-shaped stones, because the spaceships had this shape. After several centuries, the exact time is also veiled to us. The giants were attacked by a sudden epidemic that was unknown to them and cost the lives of many of them. Finding no cure for the epidemic, they fled Earth in their spaceships, set off into space, and have since disappeared. Despite the most eager investigations of our scientists, no trace of them has been found to this day. There is therefore the possibility that, despite their flight from Earth, They were attacked and killed by the mysterious plague in their spaceships, while their ships shot aimlessly through space were attracted by some star and smashed to pieces. Our probability calculations very much favor this.
Contact Report 119.
The productions represent an astrological calendar as well as an astrological garden. At an earlier time, when these grounds were still operating and were used astrologically, the enormous signs were surrounded by gardens, out of which the astrological signs protruded like parkways, etc. They were made by human beings of Earth, and indeed, without any influence from extraterrestrial intelligences.
Contact Report 216.
Then once again, I have a question regarding the pre-Columbian Nazca Indian culture, that is to say the Nazca Indians, who resided in the valleys and areas of Nazca, Ica, and Pisco, and who made gigantic geoglyphs in the desert plain, which have remained up to this day. I asked about these once before, and I was told that these pictures concern astrology gardens. But in addition to this, to this explanation, it was then later noted that the real purpose of this huge layout of geoglyphs didn't just serve for astrology. But then, unfortunately, no further explanation was given to this because I didn't continue to ask about it. I would like to do that now with this. What now is the actual purpose of these giant pictures?
The Nazca geoglyphs, as you call them, at the time of the Nazca culture, formed a large ritual site in their entirety. Therefore, one can speak of a ritual garden, of an astrology ritual garden, or of a ritual area, or rather a ritual landscape. The rituals carried out there corresponded to faith-related cultic actions and, thus, religious actions. The types of rituals served several purposes, but fertility rituals were the most common forms that were carried out at these cult sites or ritual sites. However, just like the Stonehenge structures, that is to say, the megaliths, located to the north of Salisbury, Wiltshire in southern England, the Nazca layouts also served as general meeting places, as well as judgment sites and sites of execution.
So all of the various allegations are rubbish, such as the ones that the geoglyphs would mark or indicate underground rivers, or that these are prehistoric airfields of or for extraterrestrials, as this, along with other things, is fantasized by Erich von Daniken. These geoglyphs in the desert plains of southern Peru show enormous geometric figures, animals, plants, and humans, which are only recognizable in their entire forms from a certain height. For this reason, one might get the idea that the pictures could have somehow been made by specific instructions from a certain height.
That is of correctness. The actual meaning of the Nazca geoglyphs is based in the explanations that I gave you. All other explanation attempts by any ignorant ones, profiteers, or people given to fantasies or imaginations correspond to wild fantasies, confused assertions, or deliberate deceptions. What you say in regards to the fact that the geoglyphs are only recognizable in their full forms from a certain height, as this is the case with respect to other similar pictures in other parts of the world, I must say that this is actually so. However, the production of the pictures isn't actually based on the fact that from a certain height, instructions would have been given for it. In truth, all measurements, etc., were made in an extremely accurate manner on the ground alone, even though this may seem unbelievable to today's Earth humans because they can't make any such images themselves. Unfortunately, the people on the Earth always tend to search for impossible explanations for things that they don't know and don't understand. And wherever or for whatever they find no explanations, then it must be aliens, ghosts, or demons. And even when that is no longer possible, then it's simply taken to be a miracle, even though there are no miracles within the entire creative realm, and thus, also in the entire universe and in all dimensions. In fact, Everything that is seen can be explained. It's just that the necessary insights and knowledge are also necessary for this, and precisely in these, the Earth humans are still lacking in very many respects. Their cognition and understanding, as well as their knowledge and their wisdom, still aren't so comprehensive that they could understand and explain all things and concerns, etc., which is why, in their ignorance, they call everything that is still unexplainable to them miracles, or search for solutions and explanations that fall into the realms of fantasy and error. Although the Earth person only learns slowly in time, he will find the solutions to the things that are still unknown and mysterious to him.
Contact Report 229.
Each one of the scrape pictures was portrayed by a non-interrupted continuing line. For their construction, drawing patterns were used, which were transferred and enlarged onto the ground until the desired size was reached. The Nazcans were perfectly mastering the necessary mathematical calculating. With ropes that were attached to standing poles that were held by humans, with revolving straps, an improvised circle was built which served to scrape the spots that had already been marked with tools. The light sediment layer under the desert's surface was uncovered, and in this way the figures and lines were created. The gigantic scrape figures, desert ground that was scraped away, were symbolizing gods that were revered by the Nazcans in those times. At the same time, the scrape pictures were also an astronomical calendar and a huge astronomical garden, because the figures represented portrayals of the gods who, according to the Nazca people's belief, were seen in the star pictures. For the interpretations of the Nazca star pictures, animals and birds known to the people, and also geometric figures were used which were believed to be seen in the star constellations. On the holy god day that was set at that day when day and night were of equal length, the entire people were walking in long marches over the scrape pictures and honoring the gods, and they performed rituals and ceremonies to the honor of their great and powerful gods. In order to make their gods peaceful, lower human beings, like slaves, enemies and unwanted people, etc., were sacrificed and killed in such a way that they were bound onto special altars, and a heavy wooden thorn or stone thorn was driven into the forehead and the skull, and a cactus thorn was driven through the lips to shut up their mouth for all times and to silence them. Those ceremonies were executed by the priests, who were holy men and who led a prosperous life. The priests were also responsible for the performance of the holy rituals and ceremonies on the scrape pictures that were permitted to walk on not only on the holy god day, but at any other time, and was permitted to be used for private cultic actions. As a rule, the Nazcans were people with high skulls, which means that their skulls showed an exceptional long skull form, which was not of original origin. This skull form was artificially produced. As long as the skull was still formable, it was restricted and bound with grinded metallic, stony, and wooden plates, forcibly leading to a skull of long form and resulting in an oblong deformation. This procedure was even started with newborns when they were 1 week old. Everything was not an ideal of beauty, but a tribute to the gods, to give them obsequious reverence. Only those Nazcans were permitted to have and wear the oblong skull form who were of higher class, that is to say, about 85% of the population. The remaining 15% were lower people, who had to perform slave duty and similar tasks, and who were looked upon as social misfits, etc., and whose well-being or non-well-being and, therefore, their life was laying in the hands and will of the higher ones, and especially of the priests.
Contact Report 367.
We have often talked about Nazca and the structures on the so-called Nazca Plain, which were made by the former inhabitants. But now I was asked why the Nazca culture had perished. I answered the question by saying that over the years, torrential rainfall had caused enormous mudslides that buried everything underneath and finally wiped out the Nazca culture. So Svath once taught me in the 40s. He also said then that the Nazcans had migrated to the sea to fish and collect seafood. They dried the fish, etc., to bring them back to their hometowns as welcome food.
What my father reported to you corresponds to what actually happened in early times with regard to the Nazca culture.